Is it finally Trey Lance time in Dallas? We'll break it down on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are breaking down the final regular season game, thank goodness, for the 2024-25 Dallas Cowboys. But Landon, one of the interesting things going into this game is we're not quite sure who's starting at quarterback.
No, we aren't. And obviously it's been a point of contention since Dak has gone down about, when are we going to see this quarterback that we traded a 4th-round pick for? And when is Trey Lance going to get an opportunity? We've seen him come in a couple different times. We've seen him come in and play, I think, a series in one of these games. He came in for just a handful of plays in another. But, I mean, certainly nothing like what we expected, especially considering all the assets that we put into him. And the Cowboys are not necessarily, I mean, you say that like we don't know, because the reason is because they're not being very clear about exactly what's happening. In fact, they indicated mostly, it seems like, that Cooper Rush would be the starter, it feels like, most of the week. And it wasn't even
pretty
up
early
until the show, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't until up until like showtime, really, that we started hearing some talk about there's potential that maybe Trey Lance could be the starter this week. So, I think for me and for most Cowboys fans, the first question I have is, why the timing? Like, what's the deal here? Because it doesn't seem like, the last game of the year would be the best time to be doing this. But, maybe there's some financial stuff tied in, and maybe, but it just seems like very weird timing, considering that this has been something that the Cowboys fans have been calling for a while.
So a couple of things. Yesterday, Mike McCarthy was asked who's going to be the starting quarterback in Week 18, and he declined to answer. He said he didn't want to get into it. Over the last 2 months, it's just been Cooper Rush. He's told you on Monday it's going to be Cooper Rush. So that's what's made people wonder if this is going to be Trey Lance's time to start. And as for the timing, I think they felt like in the first 2 months with Cooper Rush, he gave them the best chance to win. But with this being a Week 18 game, last game of the year, they probably feel like, okay, now it's an appropriate time to let Trey Lance get some tape out there that we can study and work with throughout the offseason. It's not going to be a big enough sample size for anybody else to come calling and wanting him in the offseason. It's probably just that.
Yeah, I mean, I think once we get through to the other side of this situation with Trey Lance specifically, I think we'll have better clarity on what was going on. Like, if the Cowboys come back and re-sign Trey Lance to a deal, I think it was the case that they didn't necessarily want to, put him out there with the chance that he, shines, and that they kind of market themselves out of re-signing him, because I do think that, there's a chance that they feel like they have got something with Trey Lance. They want to kind of keep his price tag down, and they'd like to extend him to something to kind of work on him. If that happens, then I think that's likely the case. If it's not, if this is the last game we see Trey Lance in a Cowboys uniform, there's going to be a lot of questions as to how did this trade get down? Who was behind this trade? Meaning, like, was this a Jones's trade? Was this a Mike McCarthy trade? Because I have to feel like if, the Cowboys don't re-sign Trey Lance and we kind of are looking back at this, it's going to feel like there was a disconnect between the front office and the coaching staff on what exactly they were doing with Trey Lance, right? We all just assumed that Mike McCarthy, being a former Green Bay guy and having a history of dealing with having a backup quarterback and then another developmental quarterback, that Mike McCarthy was on board. And maybe he was initially, but at a certain point, just, he kind of fell out of favor with the coaching staff. But I think that'll be one of the interesting things to kind of look back on this season once this all settles, to see exactly, how the Trey Lance situation came about and
Yep.
what exactly went wrong after it did come about.
So if Trey Lance does start in this game, and again, we don't know that for sure, but if he does start, what do you want to see from him in this game that would give you some hope going forward that not could he be a future starting quarterback in the league, but he could be a high level backup? That's really what Dallas is trying to figure out here.
Yeah, I mean, I think for him, what we've seen in his last few outings and based on what we saw at training camp, I think it's about building consistency. It's about being accurate on the plays that you should be accurate. Like I think Trey Lance has shown that he has that ability to break loose from a muddy pocket and pick up 20 extra yards with his legs, or find a seam and break out to the outside and create a throwing lane and throw the ball. I think what we need to see Trey Lance do is regularly execute the very simple plays and kind of make the simple throws the way that they're supposed to be made on a down by down basis. I think it's it's about consistency with Trey Lance. Can you do the simple things? I think what we've seen from him is that he has the kind of physical talent and the ability to make wild plays when things go wrong. But in order to get to that point, you need to be able to just make the simple plays as calls, go through the progressions, make the throws so that you can make completions. That's where I feel like we haven't quite seen Trey Lance develop as a consistent mover of the football and a game manager.
Yeah.
Really, he needs to level up his game management aspect of his skill set, and then it'll allow him the opportunity to be kind of the game breaker playmaker that he has with his athleticism.
I want to talk about the rest of the offense going into this game against Washington. At this point, why shouldn't Tyler Guyton start against Washington? Like, I guess I'm going to be confused if Chuma Udoga is the starting left tackle in this game, and if Tyler Guyton is healthy enough to play. He's been a full participant in practice all week long. It will be a little discouraging if he's not your starting left tackle here.
Yeah, I mean, I would love for the coaches to give us a little bit more clarity on what exactly the plan is, right? Because it does seem like obviously that Guyton has been healthy enough to be dressed, healthy enough to go into the game and play, a handful of snaps each game. And then, even at moments when Udoga, I think was it 2 or 3 games ago, got injured and either couldn't finish the game or was out for multiple quarters, it was Guyton that was in the whole time without any kind of interruption. Dealing with that. So I do think that it's a situation where they're dealing with a player who has an injury situation, and they're worried about the injury affecting his play, and then the affected play affecting his confidence, right? Like, so they don't necessarily want to put him out there compromised and then kind of get him a whole bunch of bad reps and losing, kind of confidence in himself. So I think what they're trying to do is manage his snaps. They want him to get experience. They want him to get out there, but they don't want to overexpose him when he's in a kind of compromised state. So it will be interesting to see, like, do they kind of throw that out the window and say, hey, we're not gaining playoff position here. So go out there and do whatever you can to try to, to go against the Fowlers of the world and see what you can do. And if you screw up, that's fine. We still have an offseason to kind of correct mistakes, get you healthy. But yeah, I do agree. Like, this is a game that you want to see the young guys, if they can play, get out there and play as much as possible.
I was going to ask you if there's going to be any other guys on offense they're going to sit, and then I went through the roster in my head, and it's like, who? I mean, I think guys like Jalen Tolbert and Jake Ferguson and Terrence Steele, all those guys just need to play and get as many snaps as possible. So outside of CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott, it's probably going to be the rest of your starting offense out there all game long.
Yeah, I do think that, and I could be mistaken, but I think Awesome Richards has actually made his way back into the practicing, so that he has the chance to potentially be active in this game and get into the game. Maybe some rotations with Terrence Steele, or maybe what you do is you rotate Guyton and Richards, right, a little bit, just to kind of, again, not overexpose Guyton, who's a little bit beat up, and give Richards some snaps there. And I think he's another guy that you're going to look to at 2025 as maybe not a starter solution, but as a guy that is going to be a valuable backup. So you'd like to see some more snaps from him, and maybe you get some snaps at right tackle with Terrence Steele. So
I want to see Richards play. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think he absolutely should play. If he's healthy enough, they should get him. They should be, working him into the lineup just to see what they've got. I think that he's shown you that he's a player that it's not too big for him. And I think that every time we've seen him go out there and take snaps, he gets a little bit better. So I think it would be really, really good for him to get the opportunity. Honestly, I wouldn't be upset or pissed if they decided to sit Terrence Steele, right, and start Richards out there, or maybe rotate Richards and Steele a little bit just to kind of give him more opportunity. It's a meaningless game. You don't want Terrence Steele getting injured anyways. No. He's the elder statesman on this offensive line at this point, which is crazy. So I think all these guys that are healthy, especially the offensive linemen, we need to see what we've got in those guys. So, when battles come up in training camp next year, we have some kind of, idea of who these guys are when they play in the regular
season. You want a little Matt Waletzko action at right tackle?
I don't know if I don't think I mentioned Waletzko's name, and I think that was a purpose, okay, Marcus. But I don't know. Okay. Look, even him, just to get him out there and get some snaps, see what you've got there. I mean, you need to know what you have in these guys at the very least.
Yes, I would agree. All right, let's talk about the defense, because they did a really good job of slowing down Jayden Daniels the first time around. Can they do it again? We'll discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns, and for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly. PrizePicks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people absolutely love the platform. I play it every single week. It is a joy to do it. Here is a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today. Use promo code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use promo code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What do you want your 2025 story to be? Every January brings a new chapter, 365 blank pages waiting for you to fill in. If there's a part of your life that you want to rewrite, or maybe a plot twist that you've been craving, why wait? Life isn't about fleeting resolutions. It's about taking control and becoming the author of your story. Think of therapy as your personal editor, helping you craft the life that you deserve. It's not just for crisis situations. Therapy can help you develop healthier coping strategies, improve your relationships, and empower you to be the best version of yourself. Whether you're facing a challenge or just looking for personal growth, therapy is a powerful tool to help you guide your journey. Write your story with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are breaking down the Week 18 matchup between the Commanders and the Cowboys in Dallas. Let's talk about the Cowboys defense. They did not play up to their standard against the Eagles in Week 17. But do you think they can get back on track against this Washington offense here in Week 18?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting question. Obviously the Cowboys were able to kind of handle business on defensive side of the ball last time they played Washington. And this was, one of the games that we were, I think, the most excited, the most surprised about, right? Like that, going into the game, Washington was a juggernaut, and Dallas was able to kind of go into Washington, slow down that offense in a way that I think surprised a lot of folks, both on the kind of inefficiency of the Washington offense, but also just in the way that the Dallas Cowboys defense was sort of able to bounce back in that situation. I do think that this is going to be an interesting game to kind of evaluate this matchup, because you have a Washington team that is still playing for something. They still have position.
A lot, by the way. A lot.
Yeah.
If they win, just to clear this up,
please,
they win, they would be the 6th seed, meaning they would play either the Rams in LA or the Buccaneers or the Falcons, depending on who wins the NFC South. That's a big difference compared to going to play Philadelphia in Philadelphia.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, in a normal week 18 game, I think that you would see them kind of try, especially against a weaker opponent, you would see them try to lean more heavily on the run game, right? And try to get, the win in the simplest way without getting people injured. But I think for this game, Washington is going to need to kind of, press the issue a little bit. So I would not at all be surprised to see Washington try to come out early and get score points early to get control of this game so that they can, try to grab control of it, hopefully get a score advantage, and then try to, sit some of these more important players once they can secure a win. I think it's going to be a difficult proposition, though. I mean, I think the one thing that the Cowboys have to as a disadvantage on defense specifically is what we saw last week, right? Against Philadelphia, the Cowboys are obviously down Trayvon Diggs, and it's not so much that it's losing Diggs as much as you don't have any more cornerbacks, right? Like, we're hoping to see Keemon Hall maybe come off the injured list, and that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah,
right?
They lost not only Diggs, but it's Kalen Carson, Josh Butler. So now you're down to your fourth outside corner. Amani, or I can never say his name right, Orowari. Right. He's out this week as well. So now it's, hey, your options are Andrew Booth or Keemon Hall, or you can slide Izzy Makamu out there, I guess, if you want. Like, it's rough shape.
I think if you've seen, if you remember back when he, was healthy, Keemon Hall really did show you some positive stuff. He almost was kind of Josh Butler before Josh Butler was Josh Butler, right? Like, where he had a very positive game and then immediately got injured, right? So now he's kind of working his way back from that injury, but we don't even know if he's necessarily going to play or not. We'll find out on Sunday if he's active. But all this is to say that that's the disadvantage that the Cowboys defense has, that I assume Washington is going to try to press the most. But they also don't necessarily have the horses to do that. So I think it's going to be interesting to see exactly if Washington is going to be able to kind of play that advantage. Their passing game is mostly kind of short stuff and then deep stuff, right? So if you can keep, everything kind of in front of you, and if you can tackle well, it may make Jayden Daniels have to use his legs, which I think that they would probably want to avoid having to do just for injury reasons, right? But I think the Cowboys need to kind of press that and force Jayden Daniels to use his legs. It may not be a good situation. The Cowboys may not be able to stop it when that happens, but I think forcing the issue at least puts Washington in an uncomfortable position, and maybe you can enforce a mistake and get the ball and play spoiler a little bit.
This is going to sound really bad, but I don't really care about the overall result on defense, because it's just it's hard for me to care about, like, Terry, or you mean another receiver besides Terry McLaurin. Olamide Zaccheaus, if he has a big game against Andrew Booth, like, Andrew Booth isn't going to be on this roster in 2025. Yeah. What I care about is, hey, does Maris Leofau continue to make plays? And is he getting downhill and creating pressure? Is Chauncey Golston getting better? Is Marshawn Nealon making plays? Like, I care. I'm almost treating it like a preseason game. I care more about the individual players on the defense rather than the defense as a whole, because most of these guys will not be starting next year.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that Washington is going to want to run this ball to control the game and to control the clock and to just basically get out of the game as unscathed as possible. Dallas, I want to see Dallas stop that, right? Like, they may not be able to stop once Washington starts going after Booth and Keemon Hall. Like, that may be more than they can handle. That's fine. Once Jayden Daniels gets loose and they start using the quarterback run game, that may be more than they can handle. That's fine. But I would at least like to see this defense stop, this team from just trying to run downhill on them and make Washington at least earn this win. And I think in that you'll see that kind of positive play from the guys you want to see, right? Like you mentioned the Leofaus, the Mozzie Smiths, the interior defensive line folks. I think that would be a positive sign and something that would make you feel good about this defense leaving the season.
I do want to ask you this before we move on. How much would you play Micah Parsons in this game? Because the last thing that you can afford is a
No.
Week 18 injury in a meaningless game. You've already lost likely 2 starters for a significant chunk of the 2025 season on defense. How are you managing the snaps in this one?
I just think you have to be really careful. I mean, thank goodness that this game is at AT&T Stadium as opposed to in Washington, right? Like that's if it was in Washington, I would say they should probably sit Micah Parsons, honestly. I think that they probably will just be judicious with him, use him as needed. I'm sure he's going to want to get out there and play a ton. But I just think that they need to be careful, right? And just kind of make sure that they're not putting him into a whole bunch of high leverage, dangerous situations. It's tough with pass rushers, right? Because they get put into weird spots. Their bodies get contorted. They're running around a bunch of big bodies. So there's definitely always that risk. I think if you find a way to just limit his exposure, maybe keep him on third down situations and maybe just some key drives, just limit his snaps so you can limiting his exposure and limiting his opportunities to get hurt.
It also is going to depend on how the game goes. Like if this game is close and Dallas has a chance to upset Washington, like he's going to be on the field. But right, but if the score is 31-3 going into the fourth quarter, there's no reason for him to be out there, and I think that's when they would pull him. I think they'll be somewhat cautious, but I expect him to play. He's a football player. He's going to play.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's people on this team, whether it's coaching staff or players or whatever, that have something to play for. It may not be obviously for the Cowboys' glory or for a playoff spot or whatever, but there's stuff that some of these folks are playing for, and I feel like as a teammate, Micah Parsons is going to want to get out there and be a part of. So we'll see how that plays out.
All right, let's make our predictions for Week 18 Commanders at Cowboys. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here. Unfortunately, our Cowboys won't be playing in them, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on NFL futures, and you can still go do that. You can bet on the MVP race. You can bet on Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, all available on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Layden, final game prediction of the year. Who wins?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Washington. I mean, just because they clearly are obviously the better team at this point and have something to play for, a lot to play for, like you mentioned, in seeding. So they're going to be out coming into fully full speed ahead. Every advantage. They're not going to be pulling punches like some of these Week 18 games you've seen. And I think that the Cowboys defense did a really great job of slowing down the Washington offense the first time. I think it'll be interesting to see the cat and mouse game. Did Cliff pick up anything from that first meetup that he's going to be able to kind of take advantage of? But I just think that for the Cowboys, they have got to find a way to continue to keep this game close. I think that's really the big thing I want to see is just a decent game. Maybe it pulls away a little bit at the end. Just because, again, Washington is trying to play for quite a bit, and Dallas isn't playing for anything. No. I'm gonna pick Washington to win. Let's say 28-21. I think that this is actually going to be more of a defensive battle up front. I think Washington. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys aren't just going to be able to move the ball very well. I mean, it's just no matter who the quarterback is. To be honest,
I was going to say I was going to make my prediction based on who's playing at quarterback for the Cowboys, because I think Cooper Rush plays, I think the Cowboys lose a somewhat close game. I think if Trey Lance plays, they lose a blowout game. It's just because I think Trey Lance is going to be able to make plays with his legs, but I just don't trust the accuracy like on 3rd and 4th situations. And I think Cooper Rush generally has been pretty good about moving the sticks. So I'm picking Washington, but man, I won't be surprised if this game is close going into the fourth quarter. I also won't be surprised if this is over by halftime and the second half just feels like it takes an eternity to get over with.
Yeah, I mean, Cooper Rush, I think the thing you like about him as a backup is that he's kind of a low variance guy, right? Like you kind of have an idea of the range of outcomes that you're going to get with him, and it's pretty small. I think with Trey Lance, obviously it opens quite wide, which is good for the potential positive outcomes. But the truth of the matter is that the likelihood that you're going to end on the positive spectrum is much lower than the chance that you're going to end on the kind of throwing 2 pick sixes and 4 interceptions and a fumble type of game that can happen from some of these backup quarterbacks. I don't imagine that he'll have that level of disaster of a game. I imagine it'll be a fine game, but I think in where you're going to notice Trey Lance versus Cooper Rush is on 3rd and 17, maybe he picks up a first down with his legs, but on 4 different 3rd and 2s, he can't complete a wide open pass or, that sort of, or he fumbles the football trying to hand it off or something like that. So, it's just, if you add in Trey Lance, I think you get a similar result probably as far as wins versus losses, but it may have a big effect on exactly how ugly the win or loss is potentially.
All right. Before we go, this is very important because this is what we really care about, draft positioning. So if the Cowboys were to lose this game and the Colts, who are playing the Jaguars, I believe, and then the 49ers, who are playing the Cardinals, if both of those teams win, the highest the Cowboys could draft, or I guess the best draft position the Cowboys could get would be pick number 11. Okay. If the Cowboys were to win, they could slide all the way down to 17 in this game.
Oh my God. That's crazy that they would end up in the back half of the draft. After this season.
Just depending on what happens with Miami, Cincinnati, Atlanta. But yeah, there's a chance they could be like the second playoff team out, and that's where they draft. So we're not advocating for tanking or anything like that, but that is a pretty significant difference in a Week 18 game that matters absolutely nothing for Dallas, which is why I think Dallas is going to make sure that they get that.
That Trey Lance starts?
Trey Lance starts. I wouldn't even be surprised if hey, Dalvin Cook, you haven't got to play in the last couple of weeks. Why don't you come and take some carries?
Yeah.
Brandon Cooks, why don't you make sure that you're healthy for free agency, and let's let Jonathan Mingo and Ryan Flournoy play. So I'm not saying the Cowboys are going to tank, but I don't think they're going to go all out to win this game either.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you have a chance to improve your draft stock, not give Cooper Rush an extra $250,000 for playing 12 snaps in this game or whatever his escalator is. I think there's a lot of reasons now to potentially put Trey Lance in. I think the question is why didn't they do this necessarily earlier? But we're gonna maybe we'll find out exactly why they didn't do this earlier once he gets into the game.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. We want to thank you for listening all season long. We know that this has not been the easiest season for Cowboy fans. The good news is, starting Monday, we're talking about coaches. We're getting ready for the Senior Bowl coming up here in a couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about free agency, all the fun off-season stuff. So you can jump right back in, and we'll be discussing your favorite team every single day. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. Enjoy the game. This is the last Cowboy football you're going to get for 6 months. We'll see you right back here on Monday.